Well, good afternoon once more, ladies and gentlemen. So again, I hope you enjoyed our opening session. And now we get ready for our featured presentation. Before I introduce Michael, I'd like to give a very special welcome to Terry Godwald. Terry, can you stand and give us a wave here? Terry works at Queen Elizabeth High School with Edmonton Public, but he's also our guru with the Center for Global Education, of which Louis Saint Laurent School is proudly a member of that particular group in looking at ways that we can engage our learners, not just in great topics here in Canada and North America, but truly around the world. So Terry, thank you for your work and support through the Center of Global Education. It is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce Michael Furdyk. Michael is the co-founder and director of Innovation at Taking It Global, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting global citizenship, student voice, and environmental stewardship. He co-founded the organization more than a decade ago during his last year of high school. So I'm going to get you to talk to a few of my high school students here in their last year, and we'll see what we can do. They have created a network that has reached out to several million people every year. More than 25,000 educators working in over 140 countries are part of this truly inspiring organization. Taking It Global works closely with the Center for Global Education here in Edmonton. Michael will be sharing with you an overview of Taking It Global's programs, their collaboration with CGE, and opportunities for you and your schools to get involved in some of the very exciting projects that are happening. So please join me in giving a very warm ECSD welcome to Michael Furdyk.
It feels very official to walk across the stage. Thanks. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here this afternoon. And before I get started and share some of our story and programs and opportunities for your schools, I just want to give you a couple minutes as you settle in with new beverages and snacks, just to reflect with your neighbor or your colleagues from your school, if you have others with you, on this question of what a future-friendly school means to you. What are some attributes or thoughts you have around the idea of your school or any school being future-friendly? So we'll give you about 4 minutes to discuss with your neighbor, and then we're going to collect the responses and create a Wordle for you for the end of the session as well. So you can get started. While you're having that conversation, we're also going to share the tweet deets. You know the ECSD transform hashtag, but I also have the Twitter accounts for myself and Terry, Taking It Global CGE, and our Future Friendly Schools project. So in case you're on Twitter, feel free to include any of these accounts or follow us and connect to us on Twitter too. one more minute, 60 seconds to go. All right. Terry, would you mind taking the mic around so I can take notes? So maybe we'll start down here with your group. Maybe we can go horseshoe around the room and just get some thoughts shared. And feel free to repeat, if one of your ideas or themes was said, share it again, just so I can make sure that our word all reflects that. So it's okay to repeat concepts as well.
All right, so we have from Austin O'Brien and St. Philip.
Hi there, we were talking about being flexible when trying to move forward, trying to implement things that people are resistant to right at the beginning, but giving it a chance and not crucifying somebody who has struggled and failed with a new try, that sort of thing.
Great, thank you. Now that's the only school I can give the introduction to in terms of where they came from, but.
Hi, we're from St. Thomas More in West End, and we thought future-friendly schools would be ones that develop students that have sound technological skills that would be creative and independent.
Great, thank you.
I don't know. I don't even know if we're on the right path, but we said safe, caring, welcoming. We didn't know how to say this, but no grade school, so every kid could work at their own level. Fully supported school with regards to teachers, special needs, etc. Time for kids to pursue their own interest. That would be the entrepreneurial spirit. And then we put up Genius Hour because that's one of the ways the schools are doing it today. Self-chosen PD, and that's it.
We also had safe as our first item that came out too, which is interesting because I don't think it's often one that comes to people's mind right away.
We had the same idea, just so that kids could have true empathy for each other, so that they felt safe, so that they became greater risk takers.
Great, thank you. So let me know, I'm gonna hop back here a little bit so we can. I'm sure you had great ideas. Well, I don't know these guys.
We said that they would be open-minded.
Open-minded?
Oh, it's very fast. We're from Mary Hamlin. We said that the concept of a school is a community or a village, with our SLPs and our OTs and our psychologists that we have already in place, and the support, the multidisciplinary approach to support of children.
Great, thank you. All right, back over here. You thought you'd get away with the mic by sitting in the back, eh?
I think building resiliency in the students is a big thing for the future, and having resources available to us.
I think schools that are environmentally and globally aware and engaged.
Hop over here.
Just we were talking about the building and the technology and things like that being so universally designed that it would be completely seamless.
Thank you. All right, here we go. Last one.
We took kind of more of an overview, and we said schools that weren't so closely tied into like an economic system or political changes.
Great, thank you so very much. All right, Michael, do we have time for any more? Because I have these great ones right here. They really want to share something.
We're
both from Bishop Savern grade 6 teachers, and we just said, you know, technology, incorporation of social media for learning, you know, getting away from just desks, that's the only way to learn. So more of like a, and respect. Yeah, respect and empathy, all that, responsible citizens, yeah.
Great, thank you so very much. All right, here you go, Mike. Oh, he already made it. Boy, that is slick. Yeah, we'll see into that dongle. Everybody cross your fingers. Come on, you could do it, technology. Hey, entrepreneurship, look at that. Holy smokes, you wrote all that down?
Getting good with the iPad. So that's a bit of a look. And we'll upload this and send it out to everyone afterwards as well. Those are the themes.
Nice. I did the hard job.
Great. Well, thanks for starting off with those ideas. I just thought it'd be great to kind of frame our thinking and for you to frame your parsing of what Terry and I will share today with some of those ideas. And also it was great to see the 3 E's and the new diagram, because many of those values and the district vision statements, things that were shared, looking at being creative, digitally aware, critical thinking, global citizens that are able to analyze information. That's exactly at the heart of the programs we're working to bring to life. So I'll definitely be sharing some of that. Just to go back a little bit, Rhonda wanted to make sure I shared the kind of history and where this whole idea came from. And it started when I was just 2.5. You can see it barely up there, Christmas 1985, when my parents bought me the Commodore 64. And so I definitely grew up digital, as Don Tapscott says. I'm sure some people, did anyone have a Commodore? It was just ousted by the iPad as the best-selling computer of all time in the Guinness Book of World Records. So it's finally stricken off the records. But you know, back then I was one of 2 or 3 people in my class. But today there's a stat from MediaSmart survey 2013 that said that 99% of grade 4 to 11 students have internet access outside of school. So back then, I was eagerly awaiting Roger stringing that high-speed cable down our street and appreciated, you know, a 1 megabit connection, let alone a 100 megabit fiber I have today in the condo or the apartment that I live in. But today, that's almost taken for granted. My 2.5-year-old is never going to know a world where he had to wait for something to download. So it's really a different experience. And you know, we didn't give him too much screen time, but whenever my wife and I traveled, he loved to FaceTime with us, and now he swipes my computer screen and the television because he's so used to how responsive and intuitive the iPad is. So I think it's really going to be amazing to see how responsive technology is to the expectations of this next generation. I remember my mom said growing up, she appreciated Microsoft Word because she spent a lot of time on a typewriter and she did punch card programming. But for me, and I think for many of us, we don't really appreciate it. We take it for granted. And what the next generation is going to take for granted, I think is going to be even more significant and a big challenge for companies and organizations. And at a young age, I also became pretty entrepreneurial because first I wanted to buy chocolate at the corner store. My parents said, well, you can choose one thing, but if you can find a way to make money, you can buy anything you want. That's kind of a dangerous thing to say. Oh, okay, how do I make money? My first business was a nature sale that my uncle helped me start, tearing out all the flowers in my mom's garden, and I learned a lesson in sustainability because day 2 there was no nature sale because there were no more flowers left. And soon after that, unfortunately, Blue Jays are out again this year, but I was a big baseball fan and got to go to both World Series and always had sports cards in a mess all over the house. And this was, I think I was in grade 5 or 6 at this point, and I just heard of this new invention called a modem. The problem was it was about $700, and my salary for my first job delivering newspapers to the Etobicoke Guardian west of Toronto was making about $50 a month. So using my math skills, I realized I was going to have to wait too long, and I thought, well, I learned basic programming. Maybe, you know, going to Walmart and seeing this whole kind of display of different software programs, I thought with my friend, well, why don't we create a software program that we could sell so we can buy a modem faster? And so we created a program to help people catalog and organize their sports cards. We didn't know anything about market research. And my aunt agreed to be our business mentor and help us make it an official company. So she said, well, I'm going to make you a stamp and a flyer you can hand out, but you need to come up with a name for your company. And my best friend, who was my partner in all of this, was named Sean. And so we thought we'd call our company S&M Enterprises. And our parents said, you know, it's not like you're better than Sean, but your name should probably go first. And they said, well, we'll tell you why in 10 years. So they still like to tell that story. And M&S Enterprises was born. So we had our stamp and our flyers. We went all over the city of Toronto. And my little dongle here is misbehaving. and not one person ever called us to buy our software. So we were a little disappointed after all that work we spent putting into it, but I found this great quote many years later from Thomas Edison that I've shared with a lot of my work with young entrepreneurs, which is, "I haven't failed, I found 10,000 ways that don't work." And in fact, later, talking to venture capitalists, what I learned was that many of them actually value experiences of failure more than experiences of success. They asked me, well, what did you learn from your greatest failure, not what was important to be successful. And in fact, one of my favorite nonprofits based in Toronto is called Engineers Without Borders. They have chapters all across the country, and they publish something every year called the Failure Report, where they actually openly discuss and share the things they failed at the worst that year and what they learned from them. So I think there's something more that we can do to encourage, at least at a low level. And learning programming was a great example. Almost every time you'd save and try to run your program, it wouldn't work. Even today, I still program a little bit, and often the first time there's always a bug, but that problem-solving skill that comes from that rapid trial and error and problem-solving. And I give a lot of credit to the childhood games back then, like SimCity and those kind of more educational games versus today's Grand Theft Auto, or maybe there's probably some problem-solving skills in there too, but a little less violent, SimCity was at least. So our parents, as a consolation prize, bought us each our own modem anyways. And we were off to the races with this whole bulletin board community. It was almost like the internet with two people. But my patience with that didn't last long. I was in grade 7 when I got my own phone line as a birthday present. And soon I discovered the World Wide Web through my friend's dad, who had a small business and made the mistake of giving us his Visa card along with an AOL CD that had come in the mail. And that first month, I think his bill was something like $500 because it was $15 or $20 an hour to be on this World Wide Web. So he got us each our own accounts for about $10 a month. I think it was 2 hours we got for that much. It's hard to imagine today. And in grade 8, for an assignment on media, we were forced to talk about some kind of new media, whether it was television, newspaper, radio. And my friends and I decided to do some research on the World Wide Web, and we discovered this company called Yahoo that had just launched by a couple of students down in California. And the idea they had was to sell pictures on these web pages as advertising to companies. And we thought, well, if these university students can do it, we're pretty smart middle school students, we can figure it out too. So we launched our site in grade 8, the Internet Exposed, trying to expose how easy technology and the internet was to use. We sold advertising. That first month, we had over 1,000 people come to our website, and we had a computer hardware store in the United States and a casino in Liechtenstein, both buy advertising on our site. And I still remember the call from TD Bank manager down the street, our branch, to my mom saying, your son's received a wire transfer from a casino. You should probably chat with him about what he's doing on the computer. We didn't even know where Liechtenstein was, so we had a bit of a family geography lesson too. But they were happy I wasn't gambling. And in fact, the amazing thing about it was, and this came around the same time that Time magazine named the person of the year as you, as all of us, the blurring between consumer and creator. It didn't matter that we were just grade 8 students. Luckily, I had paid attention in grammar class. And so I went to the library, got a copy of PC World magazine, and wrote an email to every single tech company, including Microsoft and Intel and some of the big ones, and said, I'm a journalist with a website about computers, and if you'd like me to review your products, here's my mailing address. And almost every day, the FedEx or UPS truck would show up with some new piece of technology that I could never have hoped to afford. My parents thought I was committing credit card fraud, I think. But they had no idea. It didn't matter what age we were able to present a pretty professional. I mean, you have to imagine this was in 1996. Websites didn't look as fancy back then. And so the site grew. It grew, and I merged it with a friend I met in a chat room named Michael Heyman, who lived halfway around the world in Australia. It grew from 1,000 people a month to 10,000 people a month to 100,000 people a month. We renamed it mydesktop.com. And by 1999, we had over 1 million visitors a month, more than the readership of any technology magazine. But you might imagine that we had a bit of a trouble getting investors to take us seriously. I was in grade 11. I convinced my co-op teacher to let me do co-op for myself and get school credit, which had never been done before. She said, you could just go home and play video games. How would I know you're doing anything valuable? So I finally convinced her. And my friend from Australia moved to Canada, but we didn't know anything about work visas or incorporation. They didn't teach that kind of stuff in business class. So investors basically just laughed at us. And so we made the kind of difficult decision in 1999. We were approached by a company in the US who was going public. And they offered us a few $1 million, which seemed like so much back then, split between a bunch of us. It was enough for us each to at least buy a car or something. We did a lot of camping, so I got to buy a boat. But it was front page news in the Globe and Mail and all over the world. We got a lot of media attention because it was teens selling their company. Got invited to speak at conferences like the Business Council with Bill Gates. And when I met him and spoke to him, the thing that really impressed me was that he was more interested in his foundation and solving global problems and how he could use technology to change the world in a positive way. And it made me think about what I wanted to do next with my skills. Did I want to start another startup company, or did I think I could contribute something else? And then I was also invited to be on this television show called Oprah that same year. And I didn't actually know much about Oprah. I never had watched the show. I didn't realize how many people around the world did. And I think I would have been a lot more terrified about being interviewed if I did. And between being on Oprah and also that year being named by Teen People magazine as one of the 20 teens that will change the world, it was a lot of pressure. I was the only teen outside the United States. So people like Beyonce and sports stars and all these celebrities. And I thought, how am I going to change the world? I just created a website about computers. And I was flooded with emails from students and young people all around the world asking for help, mentorship, advice, support. I realized how lucky I was to have my parents accept lower grades than I probably would have gotten if I was entirely focused on school, but also my principal, my guidance counselor, the flexibility I got to pursue my ideas and still complete school was really important. And so I was thinking, how am I going to respond to these thousands of people on my own? I couldn't mentor 4,000 or 5,000 people. And I caught up with a friend, actually, who I had worked with on a summer program. She was running a program called Girls Are It. It was funded by IBM. And she was using social issues as a way to teach young women technology skills, how to build websites and kind of build software programs. And we were kind of having this brainstorm at a conference in Ottawa about what we would do if anything was possible. How could we leverage technology to really support a need that we saw for creating a sense of community around learning about global issues on the internet. We thought we'd look, there must be some websites out there for young people and students, but all the sites that were there focused on consumerism, fashion, cosmetics, all the things that advertisers wanted to buy advertising for, but there weren't any non-commercial spaces. So we sat down that night, this was Halloween 1999, 15 years ago, and we said, we're going to create a nonprofit organization, registered charity here in Canada, that's going to address that problem. We called it Taking It Global, as both a play on words, using technology, but to help young people take their ideas and passions to a global audience, to a global community. And the broad mission we have is to empower young people and students all over the world to understand and act on the biggest challenges that we face. So we started by building what we called back then an online community that's kind of evolved to now be called a social network for social good. tigweb.org is the web address. You can barely make out in the top left, our tagline is inspire, inform, and involve. So when we launched this site, we thought, well, we're going to create this pathway to action. We really want to help young people in an informal learning context go from being inspired by an issue they might care about to getting informed and doing something about it. And we originally saw it really as a support, after-school kind of resource for students to use as part of their research. And that's evolved now to work that we do in 3 different program areas. So digital youth engagement, so using websites, and increasingly I'll share some mobile tools that are supporting civic engagement amongst young people to address the challenge of hope. Global education, so working with tens of thousands of educators around the world, around 3 value areas to really help address understanding and to use technology, yes, but in a way that really increases student engagement and addresses the 3 E's in a lot of these value areas in the board. And finally, social innovation. How can we encourage every student to pursue a lifelong passion or career in creating positive social change? It doesn't just have to be a side project or club. We want them to realize it can be a lifelong career and pursuit. And for me, that's what this has evolved into. I can't imagine going back to running another startup and having to be accountable to venture capitalists. Although I thought it'd be a little easier to raise money for a charity than getting venture capital for a nonprofit or for a for-profit, but turns out it's pretty competitive in the charity landscape too. Since we've launched all this work, we've had over 40 million people, we'll break 50 million this year, contribute more than 1 million of the resources, projects, and ideas that I'm going to share with you. So most of what I'm going to share today, most of the programs and ideas that we built, we can't take credit for. They were ideas of teachers or students who came across our work and said, wouldn't it be great if you had this? And working with them and with some generous support from government, foundations, and companies, we've managed to build all this to be free. And so what we've essentially built is this global learning community that exists in 13 different languages, and that's been translated through a crowdsourcing platform. So we've had teachers and students all over the world translate the website, not just into French, being here in Canada, but to Arabic, Swahili, Portuguese, Spanish, Chinese. Most recently, Bengali is being worked on. So really trying to explore how we can create content in other languages and support language learning as well. So what we learned about pretty quickly when we embarked on this vision was that actually it would not only be powerful as an informal learning tool, but about a year into our launch, we were invited to speak to teachers in Australia, and they said this would be a hugely powerful tool to embed into classroom practice. We started doing a bit of research on the different studies that were out there, and we found there's quite a lot of data showing a bit of a disconnect, and the Partnership for 21st Century Skills puts it pretty well in their report. They said, our education systems around the world face irrelevance unless we can bridge the gap, they call it, between how students are living in this immersive digital world and how they're learning. So it's not necessarily doing the same thing and using everything, but bridging that gap in ways that make sense and support their learning. Here in Canada, the Canadian Education Association did a study a year and a half ago called What Did You Do in School Today? And they found a huge amount of engagement in kind of the K to 5, K to 8. 82% of students in grade 5 feel intellectually engaged on a daily basis. But it's close to half in the high school, and that doesn't include students who might have dropped out. So there's definitely more we can do, we think, especially in the high school level, but really across grades. And I'm so excited that we have an audience across different grade levels, because there's different projects and ideas Terry and I will share from every grade and every subject area that have participated. So what we decided to do is to build a program, and in 2006 we were the only Canadian organization funded through a series of grants that partnered us up with Harvard and Chris Dede to actually take our idea of building this global learning platform for global citizenship and student voice and environmental stewardship and scale it to support educators in schools. And so we launched what we call TIG-Ed, or Taking It Global for Educators. I'll just share a quick 1-minute overview that one of our interns created last year.
Sometimes the world's problems can seem really overwhelming. After all, faced with global challenges like these, what can one person really do? Well, you're not alone. As a teacher, you have the ability to empower your students to shape a better world. And TIG-Ed can help. We support teachers worldwide in using technology to facilitate transformative global learning experiences. Visit our site to access free education resources that make it easy to bring diverse perspectives and world issues into your classroom. Take an e-course to learn how to design global learning journeys that support curriculum objectives and develop 21st century skills. Get involved in international learning projects and connect online with classes around the world to address the issues that matter most to you and your students. By using TIG-Ed to connect with and learn about the world, your students will become global citizens who are strong cross-cultural communicators, technologically savvy, and informed about issues that matter. Students will be empowered to understand and act on the world's greatest challenges and be better equipped to succeed in today's global knowledge-based economy. With TIG-Ed, you and your students can make a difference. Visit tiged.org today to start taking your classroom global.
So that's a little bit more about the program. And what we're really focusing on is the use of technology to strengthen these 3 values in schools. So we're looking at global citizenship, student voice, and environmental stewardship. And I'll share the programs that we have through the lens of those three values. And we're looking also at how we can develop and support educators in developing learning projects and activities that have these 3 key ingredients. First, looking at relevance. So how does what they're learning in class relate to real-world problems and challenges? And Terry will share some examples of some of our work at video conferences that actually relate to real United Nations policy processes or issues or opportunities to partner with nonprofits to actually have students work on real programs and projects that make a difference. Authenticity. So how can we actually give them an opportunity to have their learning outcomes shared with either a local or a global audience? And that's one of the things we support through a few different tools in the site. So students can both submit their work as homework, but also have it displayed and showcased and responded to by a global audience. And finally, depth. So through some of these projects that we'll share, you'll see how it's not just within the school day, but students can really dig deeply into these issues and pursue them as interests and passions on their own time as well. And so what we did, we thought it would be useful. A lot of people were asking us, well, how do you measure something like student voice? Or what's an indicator of global citizenship in a school? So we spent the last 2 years actually developing a framework that we launched a few months ago with some pilot schools called Future-Friendly Schools. And that's why I kind of started with that question. We had over 4,500 school leaders, parents, teachers, students from over 100 different countries that were part of this inclusive design process. So I was doing a master's at our design university, OCAD, on inclusive design, so I thought, well, why not design this whole program, this certification, this idea inclusively? And 11 of the 15 principles that I'll share were actually proposed by teachers or students from this global community. So we've essentially created a framework to help any school kind of scaffold and measure and assess and showcase their work in each of these 3 areas as they kind of build up and have examples to share. And often people say, well, student engagement, these kind of ideas, does that really impact academic achievement? It's more, we need to improve our math scores or things like that. And Gallup is doing a survey they've done every 4 years where they're looking at over 1 million students around the world. And what they found in the last release of the study was that a 1% increase in student engagement, they look at hope, correlated to a 6% increase in reading achievement and an 8% increase in math. So there is a direct connection between this kind of fuzzy concept of student engagement and direct kind of academic performance. So just to share with you some of the principles, so what are the ways that we look at or think about global citizenship, and then I'll share some of the programs we offer for free for teachers and students to kind of get involved. So with global citizenship, we have community engagement, global learning, professional learning, school culture, and then Terry's going to come up and talk a bit about some examples of school partnerships. So first, when we look at community engagement, what we're talking about is ways to collaborate locally or globally with nonprofits on real-world projects or activities that are happening around the world. And I put links at the bottom, but I'm also going to send out the slides so you'll have access to all these links afterwards if you don't have a device with you. So this is one of our newest sections. It's called International Days. And every month there's dozens of these days, mostly related to different United Nations groups or international organizations. Last week we had World Car Free Day. In January we have International Polar Bear Day. There's Blood Donor Day. There's all kinds of different internationally recognized days that are great anchor points for activities, for curriculum links, for partnerships. Often media are covering these days, and so if you're doing an activity, if your students are organizing something, they're great days to align with, to ensure that your work and your learning that students are doing can actually align with a global movement of activities around these areas. So these international days are really powerful kind of anchor points for projects, and there's over 100 of them that we've documented on our site. Each of them has links to lesson plans, resources, organizations, the official websites, so they kind of act as hubs for all of that content. You can click on any month at any point in the year and access those. The second principle is looking at global learning. So how can we integrate global issues and perspectives into any grade level and any subject area? A few examples of this. One is the Global Gallery. This was created by, inspired by a student who came up to us at a youth leadership conference back in 2004 and said, your mission is great, I love what you're doing, but as an artist, it'd be great if there was a way to showcase artwork on your websites that artists around the world could learn from each other. And so we built the Global Gallery. We had HP donate digital cameras and scanners that we sent to over 100 different countries so that young people in those places could kind of be ambassadors before, today digital cameras you can get for $50, but back then it was more like 500. So it was a big deal when we sent it to Hasib in Afghanistan, who took a week to go to Pakistan and pick it up, and then had over 100 pieces of artwork celebrated and shared. And we're always running different contests and exhibits for anyone whose students might be interested. Right now we have one called Moments of Inclusion, where we have artwork that's going to be displayed at a summit on overcoming isolation next week at Brickworks. We did one with the newly opened Canadian Museum for Human Rights, where we had a student in each province selected based on a piece of art they submitted, and they got to meet the Queen and Prime Minister at the groundbreaking and have their artwork on display. One of the students actually refused to shake the Prime Minister's hand, so we had a bit of a political statement made too. They weren't too happy about that. We ran one called Defining Moments, where we had people reflect on their identity as Canadians. So we're always looking for artwork, and any student can create a digital portfolio and share their art with the world. Another really popular section is our educational game section. Originally this was built just to house about a dozen games we created with different universities. We partnered a lot with the University of Toronto on topics like tobacco and food security, recently with Dalhousie on mental health, with York University on the Orange Revolution, process of democracy in Ukraine, which is also relevant again today. And we had a few pre-service teacher candidates working with us this summer, researching over 30 other educational games from other nonprofits and organizing them by grade level and subject area. So this is now a great, again, entirely free resource where you can search by grade, search by issue, search by subject area, and find educational games that might be aligned to your work. And I know one of Terry's favorite games, one of my favorites too, is one that we created in partnership with a nonprofit called Global Kids, students in Brooklyn working with a nonprofit in Haiti called Haiti, The Cost of Life. And this is a simulation game where students have to see what it's like to try to survive for 4 years in Haiti. You can't send all the kids to school. What happens if someone gets sick? What are different kind of jobs people can have? And often the first time you play this game, your family dies. And that doesn't happen in The Sims. In The Sims you choose the colors of your wall and things like that. So there's 5 different lesson plans that go along with this for different subjects and grades, just to think about how you discuss and kind of unpack some of the scenarios here, but trying to help simulate and showcase different situations. There's really some great examples of games there, so I encourage you to check those out and maybe try and see if you can survive your first time on AT. The other section around global learning was actually inspired by a group of grade 8 teachers in Scarborough who found our website as part of a Global Issues Film Festival they wanted to launch. And they said, your site's really interesting, but it's really hard to find all the information about one particular global issue because you have to go to each section and do a search. It'd be great if you had a section called Global Issues that brought together all the primary source content and student-created content in one place. And so we worked with them to execute that vision. We've just relaunched a brand new mobile responsive redesign, which means it works great on mobile phones as well as desktops. And we now bring together, quotes and facts and statistics, videos that we've curated from YouTube, so great educational videos, a Twitter feed of nonprofits working in that area, and then student-created blogs, artwork, international days, kind of bringing all that together all in one place. So if you're looking at global issues or students are researching them, they can kind of find trusted, curated content, both from other students, from us, and then from leading nonprofits and thinkers around the world all in one place. And finally, a third principle is global partnerships. And this is about how can we actually connect with other schools to facilitate both service learning, but also collaboration on curriculum. And about, I think it was 6 or 7 years ago now, I was speaking at a conference here in Alberta when some of these initiatives were just getting started. And I was lucky and fortunate enough to meet Terry, who had just kind of launched this new project and was about to build his website independently. And he said, based on your vision, we should definitely collaborate. And we've been thrilled to work together for the last 6 years, quite closely, on really teaming up on our efforts and engaging schools all around the world on some of these projects. So I'll invite Terry to come up and share some of his enthusiasm and some examples of projects that he's developed through his work at the Center for Global Education. Thanks, Terry.
Thanks, Michael. And really the vision for the Center for Global Education grew out of the fact that what I wanted to do in the classroom as a teacher wasn't working, so I would send these emails out trying to connect to someone at the United Nations or connect to some international organization, and no one would answer my emails. So what I did is I created the center. I made a kind of a framework for a website and called myself the director of education. And all of a sudden, now people would respond. But I was exactly the same person. And then when we were able to connect to Michael, everything became so much more rich and substantial. But basically, after 15 years in the classroom, grew a desire to look beyond what was just happening within my classroom and make those meaningful connections a reality for my kids. And a lot of that happened by the partnerships that we were able to build. So working with the Canadian Embassy and working with Polar Bears International, the Truth and Reconciliation, we're now doing the virtual outreach with National Geographic, where we're taking the classroom material and connecting it to the world. So you look at Social Studies 10, the Science 10, going live to the United Nations to look at the Climate Change Unit 4 within our curriculum here in the province, where the kids get to hear directly from delegates who are on the ground. We're actually sending a team to Peru this year to do some work and present a paper we're creating together. You look at Social Studies 10, looking at globalization and working with child soldiers, and so connecting to Sierra Leone and to the Sudan and hearing directly from child soldiers and having our kids present to them in terms of what their vision is for creating solutions. For grade 8 science, looking at Mythbusters, where the kids are working with graduate students to bust these different myths and then present their work and share them with their peers. You look at Middle Eastern transition, and this is where kids, a series we run for Social 20 and 30, where students have an opportunity to present on peace and violence and when it's being used to cause societal change. And what they actually do is our kids connect to a revolutionary in Abu Dhabi who's helping finance the Syrian revolution, the violence, and then they work with a Palestinian pacifist who connected to us a couple years ago, actually on a cell phone at a check stop coming out of Israel. And then the kids don't just listen to these. In each of these conferences, our kids are the co-keynotes, and they present to them. So you can imagine, there's engagement. I better do a good job on my essay on peace, because I'm going to present to someone who's financing the Syrian revolution. Right? There is an authentic opportunity to make that connection. And the gist of it is it doesn't matter what aspect of the curriculum we're in. Grade 9 social studies, we're doing some work we're going to present to senators in terms of what Senate reform should look like. And they're going to work together with peers across the country to actually present a paper to the Canadian Senate. These are the opportunities that were once extraordinary, but now with technology the way it is, they are the ordinary, or can become the ordinary experience. Where we're moving beyond, the gist of it is we're moving beyond just a video. We're moving beyond just a conception of what's going on and finding the people who were there. We were in a conference just the other day in the Middle East, and what's a classic statement? The kids said, well, what does the Middle East have to do with me? Well, Mohammed's response to that was, you know what, you have met me. When you go home and talk to your parents and they say whatever's going on over there should stay over there, you can talk about my life, right? It's about going beyond and seeing the other side of the story. That it's not necessarily just about the violence that we see on the television, but there are people behind them who are doing things that we don't recognize, that we don't see, and maybe Yes, maybe ISIS's Tumblr account, which is being used right now by women to recruit women to their cause. Yes, we know their bias, but maybe there are some biases in terms of our media that we're reading here as well. And if we can bring those lessons through personal encounters into the classroom, how much more powerful is that? And it is about the classroom. It's about, I exist in a classroom. We walk across, we work with ECSD schools last year in the Transform project, had brilliant projects that we actually came to be because ECSD teachers wanted to have them, all based on what's going on in the classroom. And one of the projects we have coming up, just before I hand the microphone back to Michael, I actually get to go on a little bit of a trip myself in person. We're going to be going up and doing a polar bear series live from the Arctic. So for all of our elementary teachers, most of the conferences I've talked about so far have been about secondary, but we're going to have a little, we drive this buggy around and with some researchers, and we live up there for a week, and then we connect directly to classrooms back and work with polar bears. So that's going to be an example of also the elementary side, and we'll talk about one more here later on.
Thanks, Terry. So now with all of that said, I thought, I mean, Terry, if you want to stay up, because maybe you'll help with some of these thoughts. We just wanted to kind of break for 5 minutes. I know it's been a bit of a brain dump for the last 30 minutes on 10 years of our work. Before we talk about some of the other programs and principles, just want to give you 5 minutes to speak to your neighbor about something you've seen so far that you find interesting, how you might see one of these resources or programs or projects being used, what subjects, values, or clubs you see them connecting with, and if you have any questions or concerns, we'd love to answer those too. So just give you 5 minutes to have that conversation, and we'll see if we have any questions at this point, and we'll keep going, just to keep it interactive. Thanks. So if anyone has any thoughts or questions or reflections they'd like to share, I just thought Terry, again, has agreed to lend his skills to kind of bop around the room and just help us. It can be a reflection, it can be a question, it can be a challenge. Love to hear any thoughts that we can reflect or respond on.
I'm a very talented microphone holder. Yeah. Anybody want to share? I won't put anybody in the spot this time.
I thought you were very passionate, both of you. Some of this stuff I hadn't heard of at all, and I'm going to go and look on it. So it's nice when we have somebody come here that is passionate about what they're doing and brings that passion to us too. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else like to share? Any of the resources you found really powerful?
Hi. So I just went onto the website, and I know that you can change the language part. So I'm a French teacher, so I changed it to French, but the videos are still in English, and so it's just basically your menus in French and everything's in French, but the videos and the articles are in English. So is that something that you guys are looking at changing, or?
We have French events that we hold in terms of bullying, and so there are some French events on the CGE side.
Sure, and just to add a little bit to that, depending on the section of the site, some of the sections and tools and resources are translated into other languages. It depends on the language team. So each language is translated by a team of volunteers, and there's a few different teacher resources and guides I'll share in entire projects that are fully translated into French. So for example, the Defining Moments program I mentioned, the Tread Lightly program, there's a new program called Explore 150. A lot of the Canadian programs we have are all fully in French, and all the content's in French, but on the website, it kind of depends on the section, whether people have chosen to post or translate things into there yet. So it's a bit of a mix, but there's definitely, I'd be happy to follow up and send you the 8 or 10 resources and sections that are entirely in French. I'd love to share that. I'll highlight those too.
I want to share just in terms of those games again, like specifically with the kids. I remember with my students, them going in and they're looking at the Haiti game like, oh yeah, you know what? If the people in the third world just thought like us, they could get all their problems solved. So they go in, they send everybody to school. What happens? The entire family dies. Like, oh, wow. And they go out. Okay, well then what do we do? These 3 people are going to go to school, and this person's going to go to the highest paying job. Well, the highest paying job is in working in a refinery. The conditions are really bad. The person gets sick, then he can't work anymore. Then the whole family dies. So, like, basically, what happens is you have this. You kids are learning about the complexity of poverty and international development in a way we can't teach them that. Seriously, you can't teach that. And all of a sudden, they start to understand the complexities and the webs and how everything is interrelated. And all of a sudden, the people in the developing world maybe aren't so ignorant, you know. And it doesn't matter. We say that to the kids, but it's not internalized until they've experienced it. And there's nothing like a game to do that. Are there any other things that stood out to you that you want to take a look at? Go ahead.
When you talk globally, you mean worldwide. Is there any global activities that you do within Edmonton so that they can understand, say, the poverty in Edmonton or Alberta?
So we just finished a project right now, working with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission last spring when they were here, and we brought together students from across the province who spent 2,000 hours collaborating and wrote a paper that they actually presented to the TRC about the Youth of Alberta's vision for a post-TRC world. So we have a number of issues that look at that regional basis, but there's also a number of partners who are affiliated with TIG. Like the John Humphrey Center, there's a number of other groups that are here in Edmonton that do a wonderful poverty simulation. There's an incredible workshop that can go on with that can be facilitated really nicely in person as well. So that's a nice part, is that you do have, how many NGOs is it that are affiliated? 27,000. 27,000. So there is just a ton of stuff that you can find. Any other thoughts or questions?
How do you get, I got a big one. How do you get NGOs affiliated with you?
So what we did when we first launched this site, and when Terry says affiliated, what we mean is that they use our website to post and share resources and opportunities to young people. So when we first launched, we spent the first kind of 6 months in the basements of our houses, like researching some of those first 1,000. And since then, we have a lot of nonprofits that come to us looking to share their resources, their opportunities with young people, because they have a hard time doing it. Often, if they've got a scholarship or a fellowship or some kind of opportunity, it's hard to promote it and have that kind of access, and so we provide that for free to nonprofits. In the United States, we also are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we're affiliated with the UN with ECOSOC status, which is a consultative nonprofit status, and that's how we've been able to accredit, as Terry mentioned, some students to actually attend real UN summits. So a few years ago, we had this COP Under 18 summit where one of the students actually traveled to Qatar and presented the white paper from the video conference to decision makers at the real meeting. So we're able to accredit, we probably had over 1,000 students in the last decade attend real UN summits through that pass system that we have as well. So it's listed and accredited, but then we also have hundreds, I would say, that we actively partner with. We're a very kind of partnership-based organization because there's so many topics and issues, we can't cover them all. In fact, we see ourselves as more of a hub, connecting students to the right organizations depending on the issue they're researching and they want to do something about. And I know there's a question behind you as well.
Is there a way to contact you or contact?
Yeah, we're actually going to share a link at the end where you can put your name, email, and school, what you're interested in, and we're also going to send everyone out the handouts from today. So, and we'll share our contact information as well. So we're eager, and we have an opportunity this year as part of our partnership with Edmonton Catholic Schools to get you more involved, and I'll share a little bit more about that later. The one screenshot I wanted to share, this is actually one of our newest mobile learning programs. It's called Explore 150, and it's fully in English and in French. And the idea behind it is to explore how we can create deeper mobile learning when young people are at natural, cultural, and historic sites. So really trying to increase attachment and understanding of students to these places leading up to Canada's 150th Sequicentennial in 2017. I finally mastered the pronunciation of Sequicentennial. And this is a fully bilingual project. So you can see this is I'm logged into the French version. I'm looking at Edmonton, and I can go to the Museum of Arts and the different activities, the information. We've done a lot of work on this. We have over 500 sites so far, and we'll have 2,000 by the end of the year, thanks to a partnership with Parks Canada. So we're actually looking at schools that are doing field trips to local sites, both to help us add new sites as something that students could get involved in, but also to use this as an on-site learning tool. So students can earn points by checking in. They can go to and do a selfie, a photo spot at one of the places that's interesting at that site and share it on their social networks. They can write a reflection, a guest book entry, and then there's trivia questions for each site, and you can see reflections that other students have posted in both languages. So the idea is to kind of gamify the experience of exploring Canada's culture and history. And the new feature we're launching next week is called Adventures, and it'll let any teacher, any school group, any student group create their own kind of personalized kind of discovery or scavenger hunt across different local sites. So really excited to share this as a resource with schools to enhance field trips through mobile learning. And that's one of the examples of a project that's fully bilingual too. There we go. So moving on to talk a little bit more, we'll have another break for questions near the end, to talk a little bit more about the next value area, which is student voice. And I'll just focus a little bit more here on student leadership, because that's where a lot of our programs work to support. One of the most long-standing programs in that area is our Guide to Action. We created this back in 2003, the first version, to support many of the students who wrote to us and said, I want to start a project. How do I raise funds? How do I build a team? How do I make my project sustainable? So my co-founder actually developed this as part of her master's research, looking at youth-led action in an international context, interviewed over 100 young people who developed projects and built this whole kind of pathway and model. We published this in Creative Commons, so any teacher, any nonprofit can reuse it for free. It's in 8 languages, including French as well, and it's a downloadable, printable resource as well as being online. And over the last 5 or 6 years, we've launched 6 issue-specific guides to action. We have a climate change guide to action, HIV/AIDS guide to action, Millennium Goals, volunteering, mental health, created specialized guides with different partners around the world. So I know a lot of people are involved in things like Me to We or social action or social justice clubs, and this might be a great resource to help students plan and develop their activities. And at the end of that spectrum, once they've actually developed a project or initiative or idea, where we also were lucky to have some support from the Pearson Foundation to launch 2 different e-courses, a self-guided course for students called Sprout Self, and then a guided 9-week course that's an after-school course that students can take to actually help them launch their social action ideas or projects into initiatives in their communities. In the last 5 years since we got funding from Pearson, we've had close to 500 young people graduate, and we've offered fellowships to several dozen of them where they've been matched with mentors and been given seed funding. We've now awarded over $500,000 of seed funding to these youth-led projects all around the world, including several dozen here in Canada. So it's a commitment we definitely are trying to share and explore when we talk about social innovation. And just last summer, we piloted what we called the Sprout Ideas Camp, working with grade 4 to 9 students, helping them develop kind of design thinking, social innovation, and technology skills. They all created educational games on different issues they cared about. We thought, you know, given their age group, there'd be a lot of people focusing on environment and looking at issues that were maybe a little more basic, but we had students doing Indigenous rights, you know, drunk driving, smoking, some really serious issues, and all those games are also on the Sprout website. So really excited to think about how we can combine the kind of building of technology skills with this idea of design thinking and entrepreneurial mindedness with social justice and social issues at the same time. So that's a bit of the work we do on student leadership. And with school policy, this was another kind of video conference-based example. We partner really closely with a conference called the Education World Forum. Every January, it's the largest gathering of ministers of education in the world. Over 100 ministers from around the world gather. And last year, we ran a project looking at learner voice, where we had students from 30 different countries with Cisco's telepresence video conferencing speak and present for an hour to these ministers of education about their vision for the future of education. So really trying to also think about, yes, we're talking about student voice in learning, as well as student voice in policy. And often, at least in Ontario, I know there's a lot of discussion about student trustees, and their interpretation of student voice is often just in policy, but we think it's just as important to also look at student leadership and student-directed learning, which I know have been on the kind of roadmap here for many years. And finally, looking at environmental stewardships. This is where some of my favorite programs are. We're looking at connections to the community, health and well-being, interdisciplinary work, policies and practices, and the outdoors. And so looking at policies and practices, this is another area where we've been doing a lot of work looking at how mobile technology can be used. We launched originally an app and now a web-based platform that works across every mobile platform called Commit to Act. And this is a kind of smartphone-based action tracker where students can go and browse the dozens of actions they can take on a daily basis to reduce their impact on the environment. For example, eating a vegetarian meal. They can track and take a photo of the fact they've done it. They earn points. They can learn more about those actions and the kind of impact they make on their carbon footprint. And there's even a new leaderboard feature where you can go as a teacher and create your own class group or class code or school code, and you can compete with other schools and communities around the world. We're working, right now we're just kicking off a new partnership with the City of New York. They run a program called Global Partners Junior, connecting about 35 cities around the world with middle schools in New York City in 6 different clusters, and they're all competing with each other this year as part of a Living Cities curriculum to see who can take the most positive actions to reduce their impact on the environment. So we're kind of looking at it, working with York University, we're also researching how does that actually change their behavior long term? Does this actually make a difference or not? We definitely have our own ideas about it. One of the new features we added was a calendar, similar to a lot of some of you use fitness, or I use a cycling app where every day you go and bike or every day you work out, you get a little dot and a checkbox. And so it kind of ties into this concept that Jerry Seinfeld talks about a lot called breaking the chain. Once you've done something for a certain number of days, you don't want to stop doing it. And so it encourages that positive behavior and tracking. So this is a great project, and we'd love to share some of the lesson plans we've built around it if it's something you want to share with your school. Looking at health and well-being, building on Commit to Act, we launched a program that was part of a Tread Lightly initiative that Staples, their foundation, funded, called the Low Carbon Lunch, which stands for Local, Organic, and Waste-Free. So looking at the food we eat, which is one of the things that makes the biggest contribution to the to our environmental footprint, and raising awareness about the changes students can make, whether that's global initiatives like Meatless Mondays, or just looking at and learning about locally sourced foods and how we can support local farmers and reducing the transportation impact of what we eat. And finally, looking at interdisciplinary work. So how can we actually embed and incorporate environmental issues across different subject areas? And one of my favorite examples of this is a project called Deforestation that was actually founded out of a meeting of teachers in Asia Pacific that Terry actually joins us on. He came as a co-facilitator of a summit we were organizing with Microsoft, bringing together teachers and schools in Singapore. And they heard a speaker named Jean-Francois Richard, who wrote a book called High Noon, 20 Global Issues in 20 Years to Solve Them. And at the end of his speech, everyone kind of felt depressed. They said, we're not doing enough. You know, these are hugely pressing issues. We're already 10 years into his 20 years to solve them, and we're not making enough of a difference. And so they asked us to design an initiative with these schools to address one of those 20 issues. The issue they picked was deforestation because of Borneo and their proximity to it. They raised funds, they raised awareness. One of the teachers had an idea of using satellite technologies because one of the big issues is that more than half of the deforestation is illegal. It's just that the communities don't have the technology. You know, satellite data alone is tens of thousands of dollars a month for a small piece of land. So we partnered with ESRI and a company called Geodan. We got the satellite data donated, and we created a project as part of this initiative called Earth Watchers, where students learn so many math and science concepts, and then they actually get their own area of land, where on a weekly basis they get a satellite data update, and they can assess the land, see if something's actually been happening that could indicate illegal activity, and then report that back to local nonprofits. And since that was launched for this project, ESRI's actually licensed it to Greenpeace for another project in Argentina. And so trying to pilot, how can we use these crowdsourcing principles of the internet to actually address directly some of these real-world issues. And this was really championed by a teacher named Chris Gauthier from Australia, who ended up being invited to be the closing keynote speaker at the ISTE Technology Conference for teachers 2 years ago, to about 10,000 people, sharing this story of how he used this as a way to bring a lot of the math concepts he was struggling with to life for students. The other thing we did, which was, I think, kind of interesting, is we had, because all these students were mostly in primary school, a lot of middle schools, there's a lot of videos on the site that we're happy to share with you. You can see how they developed the project. The students really wanted to know what was going on and to see where their money was being spent and to kind of get a grassroots perspective. And so they launched a contest where they called out for university students. They wanted to send 12 university students to Borneo to kind of be their eyes and ears on the ground and to implement this project. And to decide who to send, they launched a contest for applications. They had over 200 university students apply. And I just want to share one of the application videos of one of the students that ended up getting selected.
I wish I was the Lorax so I could speak for all the trees. For the trees, they have no tongues, and tongues are just what all trees need. My name is Mark Kurosky, I'm from Wisconsin in the USA, but now I'm living in Korea. I'm an actor teaching English, performing in musicals. But I wanna go to Borneo, where I can make a change for the orangutans. They need our help. Deforestation takes their habitat away. We can't stand by and let the whole world think that this is all okay. Deforestaction.com is taking action with Project Borneo.
So you get the idea. But he was one of the ones selected, and actually just a few months ago at the Byron Bay Film Festival, the movie Rise of the Eco-Warriors came out to kind of tell this whole story, share the struggle that they had and the programs and projects they developed. And actually this fall we're going to be partnering to release the film in Canada with a national set of video conferences with the directors and some of the eco-warriors for students in school. So that's an example of how a small inkling of a project from a few teachers at a conference can turn into a global movement engaging students and working on the ground to make a huge difference all around the world. So I know we just have a few minutes left. One of the things I wanted to share with all of this is we've been challenged for many years to really help people understand the impact of this work. When we first got started, the first couple of years, most of our initial grants were rejected because people said, well, it's the internet, it's for content. Who would want to create community on the internet? You know, this is 5 years before MySpace and Facebook. And so we really struggled, and we've done now longitudinal research for almost 8 years to try to understand what the offline impact is of some of the online activities students engage in. The last study we did was about 2 years ago, and what we found is that 89% of students talked about increased cultural awareness. 2/3 say they've increased their volunteer activity after being involved in some of these programs. 82% say they're talking more with their family and friends about local and global issues, which isn't surprising, but a lot of people say, oh, they don't care about the news, they don't care about what's going on. 68% say they gained or refined their skills, and 45% say they've collaborated or started projects with each other. So really looking at that impact on students. And so what we've done with TIGET over the last couple of years is for each of those three program areas, for global citizenship, environmental stewardship, and student voice, we've spent more than a decade going and speaking at conferences. People get really excited, but what we found and we're kind of challenged by is that by the time the summer's over, so Terry and I were at a conference in June, by the time people get back to school, it's really hard to have a keynote speech or something, a talk like today, really have a lasting impact on in-class practice. So 2.5 years ago, we launched 3 different professional development courses, one on global citizenship, one on environmental stewardship, and one on student voice. And they all have an approach of project-based learning. They happen over 5 different weeks, and the goal is not just to talk about the theory, but actually to help educators implement into their classrooms, into their practice, a specific project to bring these ideas to life. We've been really lucky with some pro bono support we had with Deloitte to be able to work in Toronto now, last year, with the Toronto District School Board with 80 different schools to implement this professional development and to study and research it and see the impact that it's had on the teacher's capacity in learning. There's a video that I'll send out to all of you to have a look at that we don't have time to share, unfortunately. But I wanted to share a couple of highlights from the independent evaluation that was done of this kind of 6 or 7 week program and some of the student projects that came out of it. So we brought everyone together at the end of the program, and we actually had the students present their projects to each other and to students and to the community and trustees. We had a 50% jump in the skills around integrating global education concepts into the classroom, a 66% growth in educators feeling able to enrich collaborative and cross-cultural learning experiences, 73% growth in being able to design student voice projects, and one of my favorite stats from this year is that 93% of educators who were part of it say they gained new knowledge and skills that they could put directly and practically into use in their classrooms. And we did all of this by creating not just this global community, but a community within the district. And that's part of what we're hoping to do this year with Edmonton Catholic, so that teachers could collaborate across schools, they could share their projects. There's a Twitter community that was also created, and then of course there was this set of online courses that was offered. And so what we have as part of the Taking Alberta Global Partnership with Edmonton Catholic this year is we have these 3 graduate level courses that are available, and they're actually accredited by a university in New Hampshire for graduate credit that's transferable to most universities in North America. We also have the Future Friendly Schools program. So if any of your schools, if you think your school is already doing a lot of activity in these areas, or if you feel like it's really aligned to your school mission or vision and want help assessing opportunities for improvement, that's something that's also available. And of course, the video conferencing. We're going to be hosting dozens of video conferences led by Terry this year, and we hope that all of you will find a way to participate in at least one of them for each different subject area. So we wanted to close with this link that we've created, tigurl.org/Alberta. And when you go to that link, it works on a smartphone or a tablet or a desktop. There's a short form you can fill out with your name, email, and school. You can check off the different things you're interested in, video conferencing, future-friendly schools, some of the PD, and we'll also respond to everyone with an email of the slides and the handouts. So I just wanted to close with this quote from my co-founder, which is really what we're seeking to try to explore and figure out, and we'd love to join you and have you join us on this kind of journey around global citizenship, which is that we wonder if all young people were actively engaged in these different aspects of society and thought of themselves in these different roles as community leaders, problem solvers, role models, mentors, and key stakeholders, how would the world change? And that's what we're trying to figure out. So we hope that you've all found something useful in this, and we look forward to collaborating with you in your schools this year. Thank you.
Now, how many people here would love a half day where you could look at these different resources and actually sit with someone, well, with me, so I don't know if that's tempting or not, but where we'd get to sit down for a half a day and just spend time on them. Let's look at the games. Like, let's go and let's look at some of these resources that are there. Let's look at the French workshops. Let's look at the video conferences. How do we make these? Let's practice them. Let's take a look at the resources and how I can effectively incorporate them into the classroom. We have 2 half-day sessions coming up on Tuesday. So this is Tuesday, like this Tuesday. So Tuesday morning, there's going to be one session, and then Tuesday afternoon, there's going to be another session. And then that'll give us an opportunity to take all the things you've seen and maybe felt a little bit overwhelmed at, because there's just so many amazing things you can do. And then we'll look at them, and then we'll just spend a whole bunch of work time going through these together. So if you'd like to do that, again, Edmonton Catholic has facilitated this. We'd love to have you come out, again, Tuesday morning and Tuesday afternoon. It's going to be at Barnett House, actually, and so you would all be invited to come out there. That would be great to have you. And you could, by expressing your interest in the video conferencing, or as well responding to an email that came from leadership, you'd be able to let us know.
Thank you very much, Terry. And Terry, don't leave yet. So we have some thank yous. So first, Terry, I want to thank you for giving your time and talent today to be part of this wonderful presentation. We certainly have learned lots from you. We applaud you for your passion, your excitement. On behalf of the Transform Committee, we have a little something for you. So thank you so much. Appreciate that. And Michael, I owned a Commodore 64. I still think it was the only computing power you would ever need, they told us. Now there's more. Now there's more in a musical Christmas card we throw in the garbage, I guess, kind of thing. So I want to thank you, because I truly think that what we're trying to achieve through inspiring education is to look at our learners 20, 30 years hence. And I think if we look at you as an exemplar and look at your passion, your background, you basically embody that entrepreneurial spirit in the right way, in the positive way. Looking at that ethical minded aspect of how you want to promote that global mindedness, to have students be authentically and meaningfully engaged in their world as stewards. And also how you've engaged us today with these tremendous opportunities that are available for our learning communities. So on behalf of the committee, we thank you for your time, talent, and energy today. It's been wonderful to get to meet you and get to know you, and we have a little something for you. So let's one more big ECSD round of applause for our two co-presenters today. Just a reminder, you do have the evaluation form. Please fill out your comments on today's session, and I'll be happy to collect those from you as you head out today. So again, thank you everyone. God bless. Enjoy the rest of your day.